Good evening. This is the special meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. Thank you very much for being here. We have an agenda that we're going to go through a couple of items, and then we're going to ask the CAO and the CLA to come up and give a presentation as to the budget, conditions of the budget at this time. What the reason for this meeting primarily is to get community input as to your concerns and issues about the budget, and we're going to basically spend most of our time on those particular issues. Let me just ask my colleague Greg Smith, is that on items 7, 8, and 9, if we can go on consent, and just for the public to be aware, there are 3 items in which businesses have overpaid their business tax, and after an audit, it was verified by the Department of Finance, and that those funds, those overpayments, are recommended to be refunded with some interest as relates to the city's rules. So if we move 7, 8, and 9, as stated by the Budget Finance, move that because the Claims Board has already agreed on these amounts.
Okay. And on number 8, that's See's Candy. Could we ask for a discount?
And also for the committee report, would you state in there, because the ordinance was just passed as to limiting interest in the future, and that ordinance will be effective January the 31st, 2010. So all overpayments after that date will have a different tax rate or interest rate. All right. Let me get started. We have public comment. And again, on public comments, we're going to give everyone 2 minutes. And then we'll go to item 10 first, because we have members of the department here. We'd like to get them back out on the street. And then from there, we'll go to item, let's see, 5 and 6. And then we'll go to the closed session items last, and we'll stay in this room. All right, on public comment, if we can have those come up and line up behind the podium. Dr. Weissman, Dr. Clyde Williams, Michael Cohen, and is it William A., WMA, and then also Tom Clark, all on public comment. So if we could all line up, everyone has 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't see Mr. Rosendahl here, and what I have to say was the follow-up of some discussion we had on the 11th. Mr. Rosendahl talked about his concern that he was a representative of the people who voted for him. And I responded, and I wanted to say it in this body, especially with so many of our people behind me, that we neighborhood council people represent not only the voters, not only the residents, but everyone who's in the community and everyone who's interested in the community. Tonight you're going to be discussing a subject which does involve and concern everyone. You're going to hear all kinds of concern. I hope you'll have your usual allowance to allow people to speak sufficiently to be able to get their point across to you. And this meeting is the first of many that I think you're going to see a lot of my neighborhood council colleagues. They've given me a little extra responsibility, which I'll bring to you when the time is right. But I thank you for allowing me to speak now, and I certainly hope that you can hear and take into good consideration the kind of comments you're going to be hearing this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA. General fund departments and proprietary departments, they all seem to have the same piecemealing concept. That is, get us stuck into something that in 20 years is going to cost us $500 million a year, such as the Bureau of Sanitation and the Stormwater Department. They've already made estimates. They had them last year of, only $8 billion. Okay, and they themselves said it would be 6 to 10% to operate and maintain the suckers, therefore $500 million a year. And they were just going to add that to the property tax under the stormwater fee. Piecemealing. We don't know what is coming in 20 years, 10 years, or even 5 years in the Department of Water and Power, the LA Airport, the Port of Los Angeles, the Bureau of Sanitation, the Bureau of Engineering, so we don't know what's going on. And I really take my hat off to you guys to try to figure out what is not just this budget, but for the next 5 years. DWP doesn't even have a strategic plan, so they can't even tell you what their goals, objectives, and strategies are going to be. They keep it quiet because they're afraid to tell the truth. And part of our petitioning is informed consent. Be straight with us. Tell us what's going to happen and when and how much it's going to cost. And make sure that there's going to be a budget for it. It's sometimes called project life costs. It's our life also. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Before the next speaker, could you just hold on a minute? I would like to, Councilman Tony Cardenas is here, and he's the host for this meeting. I'd like him to make some welcoming comments.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Parks, Councilmember Smith. Looks like it's going to be a long night, but that's nothing. It's going to be a long budget year, and which started some time ago. I just wanted to say welcome to the 6th District. We're very fortunate and blessed to have this wonderful older building that has now been refurbished, and these chambers are exactly what you're going to use them for tonight, which is to hear from the public and accommodate the public and make sure that we're always reminded who we serve and why we're here. And in addition to that, you're probably going to hear from the chairman and from the staff about how impacted the budget is in a negative fashion, how many dollars we projected to have and how many dollars are not coming in. The money's just not coming in even as projected, and our projections were pretty bad already. So I have a little bit of budget experience, and I'm more than happy to serve in any capacity on the City Council. Right now, I'm not formally on the Budget Committee, and so my involvement is a little bit distant than being in every single budget deliberation of the City Council. But I'm very proud of the fact that we have very knowledgeable council members, and I believe that we will have a very difficult budget year, yet at the same time, I hope and expect that we will make some good decisions, some responsible decisions, and put the city in a better place, regardless of how this world and national and local economy is treating our coffers when it comes to the city of Los Angeles. So I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you all from the public for being here tonight. And every single council member has cut back their respective budgets within their council district and what's been allotted to us, and I expect that we're going to go even further this year in some respects. And I'll be honest with you, today was my furlough day. That's one of the ways in which some of us have chosen in our own respective ways to handle the reduced budget for each one of the council districts. But I wanted to make sure that I came here. I wasn't dressed like this earlier today. Trust me, when I'm doing honeydews all day, I'm not dressed like this. But I just wanted to make sure that I showed my respect to all of you and came in tonight and said welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, just an introduction, I saw her earlier, I don't see her at the moment, but she's here, Tamara Gallatin, our school board member. Tamara, she's way in the back. Thank you for coming.
Okay. Michael Cohen.
Good evening, Chairman Parks, Councilman Smith. You know, pretty much the secret's out of the bag. We have a dysfunctional city, and we need all the input we can get. And talking to department heads, they mentioned that, yeah, they meet with the CAO, and then that's it. They give their perspective on the departments, what they need, changes need to be made. 6 months later, reports come out, and then pretty soon you have the budget fully fleshed out and then presented to the City Council. I think you need to get involved more with city departments. They know how the city runs. In fact, they're actually the only ones that really know how the city runs. Second point, the neighborhood councils need to have a seat at all boards and commissions. We need to have a public eyesight, public viewpoint. We had a LANC meeting. We had budget meetings. And the one key thing that seems to be missing is the public at the table. Thank you.
Thank you. On the next card is William A. Okay. Thomas Clark, Jay Handel, and Noel Rice.
Councilmember Parks, my apology. I'm Tom Carter, not Clark, but that's okay.
Okay.
And my apology to Councilmember Cardenas. I'm dressed after surgery, and so my disrespect to you. Actually, I'm here, Councilmember Cardenas, because you started the Gang Reduction Youth Program. And I would like for the City Council to read page 31, recommendation 13 of the City Controller's Report issued in February 2009, and then maybe some of you can help Board Member Galatson develop a little collaboration between the city and the school districts and begin to eliminate the habitual truancy problem that exists because policemen give tickets and the courts throw them out because there's no accountability at LAUSD, and Operation Bright Future that was signed by Rocky Delgadillo and Brewer is basically on the shelf, and no documents are given to the city attorney when they're habitual truant for 3 or more times. So I look to see how can you save $2 billion a year in gang and related costs to the city by beginning to collaborate with LAUSD. Tamar Galatson is here. You can ask her how I've been asking her for you to help. Thank you, and good luck in your mission.
Thank you very much. Mr. Handel, and then Noel Weiss.
Yes, good evening. My name is Jay Handel. I'm the chair of the West LA Neighborhood Council and a co-chair of the Lank Budget Committee. I handed to the officer to distribute to everybody a 3-page copy of the issues that we dealt with on Saturday and we have been dealing with. While we sympathize with the issues that are going on, the reality is we need to be involved. You know, we understand there's going to be some very tough decisions that need to be made, and we understand that those tough decisions are going to have to be made by people who are dealing with people that make it a tough decision. But the reality is you guys need a plan. We need to help you with that plan. The neighborhood councils need to be intricately involved because at this point, I think everything is on the table. I don't think anybody looking at the numbers of this city believe that there is anything that should be off the table. This 16-point plan is the first plan that we are submitting to you. We will be meeting regularly, probably again this Saturday. Our goal, again, is to help you, help the Budget Committee, help the city work within the structure of the problems that we have, because you know what? It's out of hand. You know, indiscriminate layoffs are bad. Layoffs, furloughs are not good. We need a long-term plan. That's what's missing, is a long-term plan with real budgeting so that we can look at employee pension rates, we can look at employee health rates, we can look at the cost of doing business in the city. Everything has to be on the table. And again, we have a lot of very smart, very talented people within the neighborhood council system, and you've got access to over 1,000 people that really want to help you and work with the budget. Because in the end, while we hear the unions tell us that it's on the backs of the unions that this city is going to balance its budget, I will close by saying no, it's also on the backs of the citizens of this city that the budget is going to be balanced, because it's going to be the lack of service, the lack of employees, and the lack of the quality of life that the people of this city deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weiss. And also Michael McCoo. Oh, no, you next.
Oh, me next? Okay. Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to address all of you. I guess we don't get stronger fighting the easy battles, only the tough ones. Legacy-making year. I have one copy, but I'm going to leave it with the CLA. Maybe they'll pass it out. It's published by Western City, which is the magazine for the League of California Cities. It came out, I think, in November, and it's entitled Avoiding and Using Chapter 9. I'm not here to advocate for bankruptcy, and I'm not here to advocate against bankruptcy. But what I am here to advocate for is really an open discussion, open negotiation. I think if you can spend 2 hours on Friday giving out awards and plaques, I think you can spend 30 minutes as a committee of the whole, basically bringing in lawyers, bringing in experts, bringing in informed people that will basically inform the council as a whole relative to the various options that exist, and more importantly, even if you actually gave a neighborhood council one person, an opportunity to engage in that, I think that would also basically be very helpful. But honestly, there has to be, I think, an open, this is a unique situation. It requires unique measures, and as a result, I'm hoping that all of you will read your own publication and begin to consider these alternatives. Secondly, I think Wendy Gruhl, the fact that she's here, she's an important component of this process. The people need to know where the money is. All of these accounts, these little trust accounts that are all over the place, organize them, put them on the internet. The public will get that information, and you know what? You'll get some good input as a result of it. That needs to get done yesterday. If they can do it with the federal government level, they can do it here. Thirdly, and I think most importantly, because we're dealing with pension plan issues, I think, and I've communicated this before, but I'm going to continue to communicate it, and hopefully we can get something done. I think there's a conflict of interest with the city attorney representing both sides of this equation. You've got the creditor of the city, which are the pension plans, represented by the city attorney, and you have the debtor, which is the city, represented by the city attorney. That is not, I believe, ethically proper, and certainly in this situation, if you guys want the best advice you can get, you need to separate that representation, and you need to have different counsel, and the city attorney's got to step up and basically say, you know what, I'm not going to do it, or you're going to have to insist upon doing that. And I, at a minimum, would like a consideration of that debate in public, and if you have to bring in ethics experts to do it, feel free to do so. Those are my 3 suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, we'd like to have Wendy, Mr. McClure, are you going to come up?
It's Michael McHugh, Mr. Parks. During the campaign for Council District 2, the Green Party endorsed candidate kept bringing up certain key values that are important for a strong democracy. One of what the Green Party feels are the 10 key values is sustainability. Another is accountability, and another is future focus. We have not observed any of these qualities in city governance, especially as far as it regards the budget. One of the specific platform planks that we brought up in this campaign and that we would like the Budget Committee to seriously consider is the establishment of a collections sheriff. Either attach the sheriff to the city attorney's office or to the LAPD. We're not as interested in how it's attached as to someone who is out there collecting the money that is owed to the city. We keep getting different stories. Some people say there's as much as $500 million that is outstanding right now. And I think the city controller would be willing to perform an appropriate audit to find out who owes what and why hasn't it been collected. If we start with collecting the outstanding debts, we could possibly hold off until it gives us enough time to discuss it, whether we should go into bankruptcy or not. But a collection sheriff is called for. Sustainable budgeting is called for, which means projecting a balanced budget into the future, at least 5 years, as other cities in their best practices have done. And we must have accountability from our elected representatives who are elected and are making their decisions with a future focus in mind. Thank you.
Ask Wendy Gruhl, our controller, to come up. She'd like to make some comments during public comment.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate being here. This is on the item that you're going to consider next, and we heard in Mr. Smith's committee this morning, and particularly to ensure that we have the opportunity, and I think to provide to the victims of rape the quick review of their DNA kits, their rape kits, and the fact that we felt it was very important, as discussed this morning, that contracting out, although is one option, it is not the whole picture. And as you'll hear from LAPD today, and what my audit demonstrated was the fact that the DNA rape kits, those that have been tested outside because of an FBI policy, need to not only be retested, but really confirmed by the LAPD. And now we have close to, I think, a 1,700 backlog for the secondary. And so the proposal that came forward, we were very disappointed that the criminals had not been hired and the managed hiring had not moved them forward. But what was adopted today, I believe, allows them to begin to hire those initial 10 and to continue that process, because we don't want to wait another year from now and be in the same situation. It was why we included in the Budget Committee last year 6 months of funding so that they'd be ready to start in January, as well as exempting them from that managed hiring at the time. So I don't want to repeat everything we discussed this morning, but we had a very good discussion and with LAPD and with many of the, with Mr. Garcetti, who was there, as well as many of the organizations that represent the rape victims here in Los Angeles. And we've worked very hard to make sure that we get that backlog down to zero and can keep at the same level so that we never get in a situation again that we have a backlog. And so I wanted to be here today personally because it was very important. And since I'm kind of in public comment, I know we tomorrow will be releasing our cash flow letter, so we'll make sure you get a copy of that, of some of the challenges I say we, all of us face, and some of the assumptions going forward, including both the revenue and the expenditures, and the big challenge we have ahead, and what you'll hear from, I think, many of the constituents today, and some of the priorities we need to look at, not only in the next few months, but for next year.
Okay, thank you very much.
So thank you. I don't have any questions, but appreciate it.
Okay.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. Okay, I have one card, let me apologize to Zuma, on public comment, and then we'll go to item 10, which Ms. Gruhl just made public comment regarding.
Yes, and it's nice to see Controller Wendy Gruhl. I had an EMS emergency alert. I didn't see her anywhere in the office during this budget crisis. So, yes, she is alive. That's good. Now, with Zuma Dog here, thank you, first of all, for the counseling under the tutelage and mentoring of Councilmember Parks, the true budget expert in the city. I hope all eyes and ears are on Councilmember Parks, and I hope Councilmember Smith doesn't say too much, because all he did was tell me the pension money was fine. All he did say the city was outperforming. All he did is say, "No, Zuma Dog, you're wrong," except for exactly where I said we are. And I'd also like to recognize CAO Miguel Santana, newly on board, and I'd like to say that the people want neighborhood council participation and oversight. I'm here to say, people, we have the answers contained right here between Parks and Santana. They know what to do, so hopefully they can get to that. Now, I admire the efforts. I'm here to say to the citizens watching, over the next month you will see the gauntlet come down and some hard measures come. First thing that we're going to see that we need to see is pension reform. And although that won't do anything to save one job or $1 currently in this crisis, it will put the city on track in the long term. Regarding private-public partnerships, do not sell off the parking for a one-time revenue. Councilmember Parks reminds me about Chicago. The convention center, it is a sell. Municipalities are not good to run convention centers. They're not competitive enough. Let somebody come in and run it, and then we can make the money. The zoo, hand it over to private operators and let a nonprofit run it. And I'm here to say that the measures that they will be talking about, we do not have enough time. With Thelma and Louise, we're already off the cliff and we're ready for impact. So though I admire all the efforts to move as many people off the general fund into a special fund and all the firings, you know, if the city of LA was a house trying to keep itself warm in the winter, not only would you have the windows open, you'd have the air conditioning running. Bankruptcy is coming. It's the only answer. I'm very sorry. You may as well get to it. Thank you, and now I turn it over to council for a discussion.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to item 10 first.
Chairman Dahl.
Yeah. And we have two public comments. Ray, would you comment on what item 10 is?
Sure. Item 10 is the motion Garcetti-Smith relative to a request for the transfer of funds to continue outsourcing DNA analysis while the hiring of 26 new positions to perform DNA analysis is being addressed through the managed hiring process.
Okay. Could we have the city staff come up to the table, and while they're coming up, we have two public comment cards, Mary Garvey, Human Rights Watch, and also Sarah from CD 13.
in Pacific Palisades. I'm also a representative for Human Rights Watch, an international human rights abuse documenting organization. I have to say that it saddens me as both a representative of an international human rights abuse organization and as a member of the city to have to be standing here today. Last year at this time, the City Council approved 26 spots for criminalists to resolve the backlog of DNA evidence mounting up in the police department. That was also used as a public relations campaign, saying it was the only item that was exempt from a hiring freeze. And, you know, here we are. Now we find out last week, behind closed doors, the managed hiring committee managed to decide that they were not going to move those positions forward, that they will limit them to 10. Our proposal and our advice to this committee is to, if you can't hire the people, you need to hire as many as you can now before the fiscal year is done, and then you need to get that money to outsourcing to keep the process moving along, because the longer that you stop hiring people to work inside on this issue, it will continue to grow, and it will continue to be a breach of the basic obligation of government to keep its people safe from criminals. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
Hi, my name is Sarah Dussault, and I'm Director of Policy for Council President Eric Garcetti, and I'm here on his behalf tonight. And first and foremost, want to thank the committee and the chair for taking up this issue so quickly, and also for your efforts to bring these meetings out into the community. The Council President has put before you, along with Councilmember Smith, a motion asking that the Managed Hiring Committee reconsider the hiring freeze on those 26 positions. The Managed Hiring Committee has already met last Friday and unfroze those 26 positions. So at this point, the goal would be to move forward on both using some of this funding for outsourcing, as well as some of this funding to accelerate the hiring at whatever capacity that LAPD could handle at this time, to move forward quickly to build that in-house capacity to take care of the backlog. And we just want to thank you for your efforts to bring justice to the victims, but also to set up a system working with LAPD that we have the regular reporting, so that this becomes a much more transparent process and all of us are on the same page on how we're moving forward together to eliminate the backlog. So thank you so much for your time and moving forward on this motion.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, you handled this in public safety this morning. Why don't you pick this issue up?
Yeah, you want to hear from the department first, or? Okay, what the Public Safety Committee this morning did is we accepted the CA report, made a minor change. We asked that the Police Department report back on a monthly basis to the Public Safety Committee on the status of the backlog, and that we're going to work with the department and the Human Rights Watch and others, and going back to Washington, D.C. and try and get legislation passed to change the FBI ruling, which requires really a double process, which is wasteful and time-consuming. So I think it was the right thing to do. Human rights people are on board with that. The department was on board with that, and it, I think, fixes the problem.
Now we have the staff report.
Good evening. Assistant Chief Michael Moore, Office of Special Operations. I'm joined by Mr. Chaliff as well as Ms. Sanchez-Owens. And much has been said leading up to this. The department remains committed to the two-prong approach that has been established to make a lasting impact on our capacity to accomplish the necessary testing of DNA and also the timely testing of those DNA sexual assault kits. Since the four-phase process was identified and adopted by the Mayor, City Council, with your support, as well as the department's invoking that plan, great progress has been made in reducing the backlog of these sexual assault kits. Presently, for fiscal year 9 and 10, we should be in phase 3, of which 26 positions were identified. 6 months of funding was set aside. The Managed Hiring Committee has said, we're very happy to report, did meet this past Friday and has unfrozen those 26 positions and improved the hiring. The department is moving very directly with the personnel department as to hire to our capacity. Pragmatically, we can put 10 criminalists through the training at a time, and we're going to also hire a lab tech It is our understanding that there will be remaining monies or funds left from the total monies that were set aside for the 26 positions, and it is our desire and hopes that this committee, as well as the full council, will approve the transfer of those remaining monies after the anticipated salary set aside for the 10 criminalists and the 1 lab tech. That the remaining monies would be allowed to be moved to contractual services so that we could outsource additional backlog sexual assault kits. Presently, there are approximately 1,254 untested sexual assault kits in our inventory. This is inventory that changes each day as new sexual assaults occur to the rate of about 1,200 per year. It is an ongoing effort to outsource the original backlog as well as to test those new cases that are coming in. The monies that would be transferred would allow us to, we believe, eliminate this backlog of 1,254 cases and also accomplish testing of the cases that are expected between now and July of 2010. So we are going to also, given direction from Public Safety today, we'll be completing monthly written reports. We'll be returning back to that standard of reporting to Public Safety each month with the actual status of kits, what's been tested, what's been outsourced, what's come back from outsourced and is waiting verification. We are working with, and we've met just this past week with representatives from the Human Rights Watch as well as the Santa Monica Rape Treatment Center. I spoke again this afternoon with Mr. Barbanal of Santa Monica Rape Treatment Center, and we are all in agreement that this monthly report will be a transparent one. Meeting with Chief Beck, his desire is that this report not only be before the Public Safety Committee on a monthly basis, but it be published on the web and made available to any advocacy group that would be interested in seeing it. And then on a quarterly basis, we will also make such a report available to the City Council during a presentation. And then finally, as to this issue of the CODIS updating, the need for verification once tested by an outside lab, we are also hopeful that there is an additional grant, efficiency grant, to about $247,000 that has been identified that is before the council for consideration that would allow us to go back and test the 1,700 cases that remain right now for verification that will allow us to upload those CODIS profiles into the national database. So it's our hopes that that will also be approved here shortly, and we'll be able to put those monies directly to use with existing SID staff on an overtime basis, and certainly are available for any questions.
Let me just ask one thing on the issue of this year's budget. In addition to the money for the positions, there's about $1.5 million for outsourcing. Has that been exhausted?
Yes, it's our understanding that the monies that have been set aside have all been encumbered. There are some invoices of the outside vendors that have not yet been paid, but all the set aside money has been encumbered by testing that is now in process.
Okay. And then, if I understand the CAO's report, they're recommending that we move $871,421 from the police department salary account into the contractual services. And if I understand it, this amount of money will take care of the current backlog through June 30th?
This amount of money in concert with other monies that we're in pursuit of obtaining. It is our hopes that with the support from the Police Foundation, there's been a continued citizen support in contributing to the foundation to help augment the funding necessary to complete the backlog with the contract services.
Okay. All right. Mr. Smith, if we...
I just had one comment to that. This is strictly for the sexual assault kits, that the homicide is working off a separate grant of $1.2 million. So homicide is working off that separate money.
Yes, there is a $1.2 million NIJ grant that is for cold case homicides. There's been much discussion, as Councilman Smith raises the point from this morning, that there are other backlogged items, per se, crimes of violence as well as property crimes. This, however, has been identified clearly as the most pressing priority, and it is our hopes that, in part, by the building of capacity, long-term capacity within the department of these 26 positions plus the second 10 positions that were scheduled for Phase 4 of this master plan that will not only maintain current status with all sexual assault kits, but that we will have some capacity. It's unclear exactly to what degree, but some capacity to do additional testing with other violent crimes.
Thank you. I just wanted a clarification. It's my understanding that perhaps some of the stimulus money or some additional federal funds has been made available to the city for this purpose. I would think this is a project-ready type of funding when Washington looks at this.
Yes, Councilman, there's the total deficit for the backlog is estimated at $2.3 million. And this is for the sexual assault kit backlog, is by my last briefing, and this $877,000 or $860,000 will go to that pot. There is an additional $300,000 to $400,000 of police foundation, and then there is an additional, we're hoping, federal stimulus money or grant monies that can also fill the void. It is our belief and hopes that we're working with the mayor's office as well as council staff to arrange for this for the building of, if you will, of that amount.
Thank you.
All right, the committee will move the January 25th, 2010 CAO report with the two recommendations regarding the transfer of the funds and the instruct police department to provide monthly status, with one change that we make the monthly status as a written status report as articulated by Mr. Smith, and we'll also endorse the public safety report that was approved in their committee today with those recommendations.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move that item to council. Okay, the next item, we'll go to number 5 and 6, and we'll have together. Before we do that, if we could ask the city attorney, just so there's clarity as to the Brown Act and what this body can respond to and the actions it can take from public comment on items 5 and 6.
In terms of the Brown Act, certainly you could take information from the public in terms of the kinds of information that this body is willing to take on. In terms of action, you would just then move that over to the full city council. But at this time, it's not really a dialogue. It's an opportunity for you to take information.
Okay, thank you. Before we have staff, Miguel and Lynn start, let me ask public comment so you can hear the comments from the public and you can possibly tailor your remarks that may address some of their concerns. Dr. Clyde Williams. Next in line is Michael Cohen, Zuma Dog. And Zuma Dog, you have we're going to take 5 and 6 together, so we're going to call your name for both 5 and 6. Dr. Williams.
Hello. Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Burr Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA. At least we have 2 out of 5 of the board members. So one of the questions is that a quorum? So is this all a waste of time, kind of? Okay. The deficit, huge. How to get by? Okay, you can increase the fees. Hey, just add a fee to the stormwater fee on the county's tax roll and make it roughly $1,000 per parcel for the next 4 or 5 years. That's approximately what you need in order to get by. So, if not that, we're going to have huge fee increases. Oh, how about salaries, pensions, and benefits? The one nice thing about bankruptcy is all things are on the board. So bankruptcy, and the last CAO meeting, I heard the bankruptcy word 4 times, the B word. Okay. That's the only way to get it. Sales? Yeah. I'd like for you to sell the Department of Power. Why? Because you have no control over them anyway, and they seem to be doing pretty much anything that they want anytime they want. the Bureau of Sanitation. Hey, you got garbage collection and sewage. Those are two big ones in the rest of parts of the world. I was with Parsons when we did one. It's not bad for the private side of it, but we also came up with a new definition of public-private partnership. That is, the private pillaging the public. Thank you.
Mr. Cohen?
It's pretty much consensus that we can't grow our way out of this budget crisis with added revenue. So certainly cuts are going to have to be made in very large ones. But I would like you to consider protecting constituent services rather than laying off another 15 to 2,000 people to bring the budget more in line with revenue. That you work out a, well, I don't want to use the word deal, but in its best character with the employees so they can take a cut in pay. Many of them that I speak to would rather take a cut in pay than be laid off. This goes in private business as well. The continuing laying off of people that happened through ERIP and is likely to continue to happen is just hollowing out the city. It'll be like a gourd. You see it, you can put it on your shelf, you can toss it around, but there's nothing inside of it. It just rattles. I don't want to see LA to become that way. There must be a way of working this out. If not, then the contracts with the unions and the city charter will come on the anvil, and the hammer will be Chapter 9. There are other cities that have done it and are contemplating it across the nation. And surprisingly enough, from my reading of attorneys that have handled it, it's easier to break labor contracts under Chapter 9 than under Chapter 11. Thank you.
Thank you. Zumadol? Okay. So Gary, let's see, Encirno, Don Schultz, Kristen Sabo.
So Carrie Icino.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Carrie Icino. I'm a board member of the Reseda Neighborhood Council, but I'm also, more importantly, a business owner in this city, and businesses like my own have already had to cut back possibly a year or two ago to survive the climate that we're in. The city would do best to move sooner rather than later in making those hard choices, those hard cuts, because the sooner those cuts are made, the sooner the savings are realized, and hopefully early cuts would allow the city to maybe weather the storm and possibly not have to go into something like bankruptcy in the future. So my recommendation in terms of the budget and the fiscal problems that the city is having is do what the businesses like mine have done and cut early and try to survive so that we can be solvent for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz?
Thank you, Chair Parks and Mr. Smith. Allow me to make a simple observation. This Budget and Finance Committee should not be on its own having important meetings with the public throughout the city while discussing cuts to budget and staff of the LAPD. The Public Safety Committee of the City of Los Angeles should be sitting here with you. My sense, anyway. Are you aware of the fact that the prisoner release program to reduce the state's prison population by 6,500 inmates over the next year begins today? This poorly thought-out program approved by the courts makes the perfect argument for increasing our law enforcement budget, not decreasing the budget, or not hiring new LAPD officers. You know, given the choice, if I am in a serious physical peril, I will not call my elected official or his staff. I will call a cop. Finally, if the City Council is successful in saving money by cutting the size of our LAPD, I am sure that I will not be the lone registered voter in the city to start a recall campaign against those irresponsible elected officials. And I do thank you for your attention.
Kristen Sabo?
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Kristen Sabo. I'm a volunteer for the Department of Recreation and Parks. Last year, I did almost 1,000 hours, and it was hard work, the stuff the maintenance guys would do. My question is, when you reduce their labor force down to by 44%, who's going to do that? I don't have any more hours in the day that I could do it. I would also like you to consider the fact that Recreation and Parks has almost become your de facto social services department. There's an awful lot of gang programs and things tied to parks that if you don't have the staff, say you have 54%, 56% of what you have, they're going to be forced by liability to do maintenance. You're not going to have your social programs, and those are life-saving, life-changing for things in both of your districts. It's terribly important that you think about what you're doing when you're cutting personnel. That's why I really actually encourage you to, A, let the general managers manage as opposed to handing them the layoff situation. Give them a budget, let them manage their people, okay? Last year you almost did with Rec and Parks and then you took it away. And I'm really sorry that happened because you'd have proof that it could be done now if you hadn't taken it away. You know, the other thing is you want to think about constituent services. We don't want to lose those. Bankruptcy may be something you have to look at. I highly encourage you guys to get the kind of counsel that Noel Weiss was talking about and just get the information. That doesn't hurt. It doesn't look bad on anybody's political record. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McQuiston?
I'll wait for the rest of it.
Pardon?
I'll wait a while.
Oh, okay. All right. So you want me to hold your time while you're waiting?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Handel? Jay Handel still here? Paul Hatfield?
Thank you. I'm Paul Hatfield. I'm a member of the Neighborhood Council Valley Village. I'm a CPA, and I've worked in industry for over 30 years in both corporate accounting and finance. And I can tell you I'm very good at running the numbers, and what I'm seeing is very discouraging. To resolve the fiscal crisis in the long run, with or without bankruptcy, we're going to have to start transitioning as many employees from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan. I realize that's going to take very intense negotiations with the unions. But if we want to survive in the long run, we're going to have to do that. The problem with a defined benefit plan is that the costs are subject to assumptions, to market swings, and to politics. And as long as we have that, we're not going to be able to control those costs. On the other hand, the cost of a contributor of a defined contribution plan is very predictable and very controllable, and you could bank on that. So I urge you to begin negotiations as soon as possible. The longer we wait, the worse it's going to get. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Weissman?
Thank you, sir. You have copies of the document I'm going to read from. I'm going to go to the back page first. You have before you a huge amount of expertise, a huge amount of willingness, and a lot of suggestions, which we must believe have already been circulated in the City Hall offices. But the people who are here want to be part of this. Already this year, the LA Neighborhood Council Coalition has held 3 heavily attended meetings. The first one with 27 people. You were at one before these 3 meetings were held, Mr. Parks, and were some of the stimulus for everything we did. Then, in the middle of January, there were 80 activists and 4 members of the city family, including 1 council member, and we really were glad he was there. We hope you'll come to many of our meetings, and that invitation's open to everybody. But we have now a financial advisory committee, Mr. Handel, who didn't respond a moment ago. I hope will be back to talk to you further about that. And our 4 steps that need to be done is we first need to analyze and understand the whole financial policy and procedures of this city. We city neighborhood council people need to get better information and have it available to us. We need your help to facilitate that. Now, it's important for us because we, the neighborhood councils, must fulfill our chartered responsibility to promote more public participation and to be advisory to you. We ask that you appoint and receive and engage in non-voting ex officio, perhaps neighborhood council representatives on this committee and on the mayoral and city council committees and task forces of all kinds in recognition of the chartered responsibility to the city for the purposes of assuring consideration of the views of the community in all of your deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a copy of your document. Joanne Garb, Barbara Burke.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'd like to ask what efficiency and productivity studies have been conducted to see who is actually productive and should stay employed and who is not productive and be laid off. I read this morning in the Daily News that a reduction in staff needs to be completed quickly in order to get outside contractors in place. Now, that doesn't make sense to me that you're going to replace your city workers with outside contractors. Does that mean that the public employees are going to be replaced by private industries? Also, tonight, my son Jacob, as you all know him, who's 15 years old, wanted to come, but it's a school night, and he couldn't. And I said he wanted to know about the meeting and what was going to be discussed. His big question to me was, Mom, how much is this going to cost me? He's 15. He's already thinking about that. What message are you going to give me to take home to my children, because they are the ones who are going to inherit the results of your actions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Parks and Councilman Smith. Barbara Monahan Burke, Studio City Neighborhood Council Board Member and Government Affairs Co-Chair, and also a member of the 15-member Neighborhood Council Advisory Committee for the budget to the mayor for this past year. As such, I've gone to lots of meetings on this subject, so I'm going to give you some of my personal insights. We are asking neighborhood council stakeholders to advise the mayor about their budget opinions on items he's concerned with and those that they are concerned with. And I sure hope that you, as council members, get a hold of the results of that survey. It's pretty intricate this year. We've worked really hard on it with the mayor's staff. The city charter states that individual neighborhood council are to advise not only the city council, all of the members, and the mayor, but also the city departments and staff, the city commissions, the city attorney, the city controller, and even the county, state, and federal governments where the local concerns are tied into those bodies. This really isn't recognized, I believe, by most of the city council members, and it should be. We're working on that. We need to be at the table, especially on task forces. We hardly ever are, and when we are, it's not representative. There are not enough of us within that system, which should be transparent. And as elected volunteers, as board members, but also all the stakeholders that we involve in programs throughout the city, we really give you innumerable hours of volunteer time. And we would like you to know that that really is valuable. A lot of it is expertise. And we're there for you to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you. George Wolfberg. John Meyer.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Smith, I'm here to tell you what you already know. You are broke. Every day the bullets that I jotted down. We cannot afford to hire more police officers. We don't have the money. We cannot afford any more early retirements. We've lost institutional memory. There's an incalculable cost of that, and it's exacerbated by term limits, which is perhaps beyond your control. We must go back to basics. Maybe we should take a look at what the staffing was on Tom Bradley's last day and ratchet it down for all elected officials. We have to stop living off of credit cards. This means no more MICLA. MICLA is a subterfuge to hide an unbalanced budget. We cannot take care of our crumbling street infrastructure. The streets are crumbling and becoming unsafe. We should send a bill for sidewalk repairs to the property owner, like they did in the bad old days. We just can't be the Santa Claus anymore. People are just going to have to pay for it. Do we need a CAO and a CLA? Probably not. Did you know that the CLA started with one person? I believe that the CLA can be transferred and consolidated back into the CAO's office. As to consolidating retirement, maybe there will be some management savings, but the funds should be kept separate. The fire department, you could eliminate 1 or 2 battalions. Would not affect the fire stations. It would be the supervisory overhead. Each battalion chief might have 1 or 2 more stations to take care of. We're talking in the millions of dollars that you could save. Consolidate animal control with the county, long overdue. Consolidate all the crime labs, city, county, and arson. They could have the best equipment. They could run 24/7. They probably would catch up on some of those rape kits we've been talking about. So I've got a few more things, but I see my time's up.
Did you leave us the document?
Yes, I will.
Okay. John Meyer?
Thank you very much. I am a businessman and a computer programmer. It's been my experience that if you have $10 of assets and $20 of debt, there's not enough assets to cover the debt, and you have to there's 2 ways of doing this. Either you can rearrange things in which things have to fall off the edge, and then you have to just decide which ones are going to fall off the edge, or you need to grow your way out with marketing. And I don't know how that affects this, but you need to find something that is profitable, perhaps getting tourists in. I don't know. In order to get the marketing and in order to get the creativity, which is the new answers to the old problems that don't have the answers right now, you need to do brainstorming. And in order to do the creativity, you need new strategy. The best way to do that is by being transparent and by opening what's going on and by putting out your problems so that other people can see them and so that other people can start solving them. When Netflix wanted to expand and they wanted to get some new algorithms going, they made a contest and they put up the rules. They made it totally transparent. They said, here's what our problems are. We know what the solution would look like. We don't know what that solution is. Let's have a contest. Whoever can think up the best solution will be able to grade it, and it'll be great. And so all kinds of people came in. They worked for fame. They didn't work for money. Well, they worked for money as well. In order to do this, it helps if you have web pages, something like SimCity, so that people can see what's actually going on. The important thing is transparency. When you have transparency, then people don't feel like they are against the city, and you're not going to have riots and you're not going to have angry people. If they feel like they're making a contribution, they can see what's going on, then you're not going to have the civil disobedience on top of the problems that you have.
Thank you.
Creativity.
Thank you. Jack Humperville? Zumadog?
Yes, thank you. Once again, I'd like to thank publicly Councilmember Bernard Parks for the past 3 years of his tutelage and mentorship and knowledge in telling me the way it is, and then also newly the CAO Miguel Santana. and his associates who is here with us today. I believe that these people have the answers for the city. I'd like to give you an update of the information that I've acquired through my discussions with these three people. First of all, Miguel Santana, the CAO, was quoted as saying that the revenues are the worst that the city has seen since the Depression. So I'm here to say to the viewers watching at home, it's very bad. The city was expecting certain revenue projections. It's falls short. It's bottomed out entirely. And the problem is that the mayor, Wendy Gruhl, Eric Garcetti, well, nobody wants to declare bankruptcy or file for bankruptcy because they all want to run for higher office. Now, the thing is that through the firings of 1,000 people or more, through the early retirements and furloughs, it is going to be putting the city at a dangerous level of service. Things like the accounting department that took the hardest hit to early retirement, financial markets concerned that the accounting department won't be able to meet its financial obligations. We're not going to have the auto mechanics to keep the fire, police, and EMS vehicles responsive. That is going to be challenging. This is where it's at, people. So, we're at this point, we've had no leadership, nobody at the wheel. Now it's time to hand out the lifeboats. I want the people watching at home to know we need a focused effort. It's going to be very brutal. The gauntlet's going to come down in ways that we've never seen in city history. It wouldn't have been this bad if 2 years ago, a year ago, and I'd like to make special note of Wendy Gruhl when I remember her sitting right here as council member getting that, glazed over stare about belt tightening, and now she's controller. She needs to step up. But the main concern is that the plans that they have, I heard what the plans are, it's not going to be soon enough, and we will be having to file bankruptcy. I say you should just get right to that.
Thank you. Mr. McQuiston, you're the last speaker before we go to the staff.
Jim McQuiston, as you know, I spent a lot of time looking at the budget for many years. And I've put in a paper with some suggestions. There are certain departments, of course, that have the substantial weight in the city budget, and I've tried to address some of those first. There are a few that I have not, for example, the police and the fire department. Basically, I want to say, and people should realize this, that we have a constitutional Article 13D, which says people should pay for what they get, and people should not pay for what other people are getting. And unfortunately, we are not paying as much as we are getting. We're depending on the tourists to pay for things that we are getting and not the tourists. They're paying double. And we have to correct that. And we have to get on that right away. And as you saw from my statement, I won't repeat that here, there's a lot of money involved, a lot of money. And we do have the legal method for getting that money back. And we could get not only this year's money back, but several years' money back. And that's going to affect me greatly, and still I'm saying this is what we have to do. We have to move forward, and that is the way to move forward. Our city is great. We've been put under the screw, unfortunately, but we do have the Constitution that's going to help us get out of this. We don't have to go to bankruptcy. All we have to do is get the mayor to get off the dime.
Thank you. Thanks to staff, Miguel and Lynn, to come up and on items 5 and 6 to provide overview for the public and for the constituents to hear as to the priorities of the budget for 10-11 and also what the current status of the budget for this fiscal year. And Miguel, particularly if you can comment on the letter that you just received from council leadership and the mayor as to some of the programs that you will be moving forward on.
Thank you and good evening. Let me start off by saying, in reference to comments that have been made, which I think have been very helpful in framing our current status, that indeed we are broke, but we are not bankrupt. And bankruptcy is an option that should not be pursued until all other options are pursued. And we're working very diligently, our office working with the council and with the mayor, to make sure that bankruptcy is not an option for the city of Los Angeles. Let me start off by sort of providing a quick update as to where we are with our current budget. We started this fiscal year with a deficit that was over $300 million, and with direction to work with our partners in labor to reduce that deficit through the shared sacrifice strategy that was adopted in part of the budget. Within the first quarter, that deficit grew by nearly another $100 million, mainly a result of the drop in revenue. We've continued to see that drop in revenue and has now contributed to a total revenue loss for this year of about $185 million. The good news is, and there is some good news in everything that we've gone through this year, that as a result of our negotiations with labor, on the expenditure side of the ledger, we've been able to reduce the deficit from $400 million to $300 million. We did that through the early retirement program, through through the better management of overtime, through a series of concessions that we were able to achieve with the majority of our bargaining units. And I think there was a reference here made that we should sit down with them to find a way to avoid layoffs and have them engage in some kind of sacrifice. We haven't indeed done that. If the only problem we had was on the expenditure side, I would be able to report to you that our problem would be approximately $22 to $30 million for this fiscal year. And with a reserve of $225, $230 million, we would be in a situation where we could absorb that kind of hit to our reserve and proceed forward next year aggressively. Unfortunately, our situation is not just on the expenditure side. Our situation is now on the revenue side. No one could have anticipated the kind of deficit and the kind of drop in revenue that we are currently seeing. I did indicate, as it was stated, that we have seen 4 continuous quarters of double-digit drops in our collective revenue. And we charted this out all the way back to the Great Depression, and indeed, the last time the city's seen that kind of drop was in the Great Depression. This is after we adopted a budget that assumed a reduction in deficit by 10%. And so this unprecedented number could never have been forecasted. This recession has lasted longer than any one of us anticipated and has been harder on Los Angeles than any of us had anticipated. So we're forced now to make even additional cuts to our current budget and engage in a series of cuts that will be structural for next year's budget and the following year's budget. Out of all of the solutions we came up with this year, about 25% of them are structural. It is a good beginning in reducing a structural deficit that existed within the city for many years, but it's not enough in terms of where we need to go. What we will be proposing, and what was directed to me by a letter signed by the mayor and the members of this committee, some members of this committee, as well as the entire EERC committee, which provides me direction on labor negotiations, is that within our financial status report, which is expected to come out this Friday, we should identify 1,000 layoffs throughout the city of Los Angeles. This is a very difficult task, and there is no doubt that it will have an impact on every single department in the city, and it will have an impact on the services that we provide. We're going through that process now of identifying where those layoffs would be, and they are far-reaching. There will be recommendations to eliminate some departments altogether. There'll be recommendations to consolidate others within other departments. There'll be recommendations to reduce some departments in half. And there'll be recommendations to establish a set of priorities that are based on the priorities that have been provided by the policymakers so far. Those priorities are to, number one, minimize layoffs in those areas that keep the lights on, that basically provide the day-to-day function of city government, from paying our bills to managing our books. The second area is to minimize any layoffs in areas that generate revenue. It doesn't make sense to lay off somebody who actually helps produce revenue and will result in even greater layoffs later. And then the third area is to avoid as many layoffs as possible that jeopardize the public safety of our community. And finally, we're looking to focus those reductions in areas that are primarily general funded positions. The other areas that we're looking to do are those by asking ourselves three simple questions. How quickly could we have that person leave city service? If a function is eliminated, what will the impact be to the city? And third, how will this layoff result in ongoing savings to our structural problem? It is our goal that we will be able to generate $100 million worth of savings for next fiscal year as a result of these layoffs. The fact of the matter is that there will be very minor savings for this current fiscal year. This city has not engaged in layoffs of this magnitude at any point of its history. And so that process to do so is incredibly complicated. It is based on a seniority system. It's like having a machine in a box and you've had it there for several decades and you're finally plugging it in to see if it actually works. So we anticipate that the layoff process will take 2 to 3 months to finally complete. At the end of the day, the savings will be minimal for this fiscal year, and we are hampered by current agreements, particularly with the coalition, that limit our ability to engage in layoffs for this current fiscal year. But if we do our jobs right, we'll be able to generate a full year's worth of savings for next fiscal year. And one of the reasons why that is important is because we would be in a much different place today had we done the work that we needed to have done sooner. We began the process of seriously negotiating with our bargaining units in the summer after the budget had been adopted. Most of the agreements weren't approved until September, and so we weren't able to maximize our ability to generate the savings necessary through those various initiatives. We should do everything possible to avoid that kind of delay this fiscal year and work very hard to generate a full year's worth of savings for next year. As we begin this work, I think one of the things that was stated across the board from many members of the public is that we can't just look at the budget in isolation of what's going on this year. The reality is that the city has been carrying a structural deficit of a couple $100 million for several years now. And during the good years, we've been able to deal with that deficit with one-time money that came as a result of the strong economy. And obviously now, with the economy being as bad as it is, we're limited in our options to do that. Our deficit continues to grow, and in the next 4 years is projected to be over $1 billion if we don't act now and take serious actions to reduce it. And so what we're working on, concurrent to the immediate issue of reducing the deficit, is on a 3-year plan that was cited in the letter and signed by Mr. Parks, Mr. Smith, and their colleagues. In that 3-year plan, we're looking at how we reduce the deficit on an ongoing basis and lead the city into a financial situation so it's no longer in the place it is today. That 3-year plan lays out some very basic principles for sustainability. The first principle is very basic, is that we must adopt and follow basic fiscal policy to ensure that we're not in the same situation in the future. That means committing to a reserve that reflects at minimum 5% of our general fund, operating general fund. Why is that important? Because like in any household, you always need to have money stored for in case of an emergency. And certainly, as we're reminded of what happened in Haiti, that's obviously something that's important for us here in Los Angeles. But a healthy reserve is what signals to our lenders as well as to our credit rating agencies that we are in fact in sound financial health. One of the ways that we're going to get through this year is dipping into a reserve of $230 million. That is certainly not something we should do as an ongoing practice, and we must commit to have a reserve replenished as soon as possible. It was mentioned that we should stop using our credit card, or MICLA, as our commercial paper program here at the city, and that is absolutely correct. We've used MICLA as a way of paying for things that are nice to have, or even at times using it for our own operations. MICLA is a program that should be used for those things that are absolutely critical for capital that produces ongoing assets for the city of Los Angeles. And so one of the things we'll be recommending in our financial status report that we put that credit card away. And then we must engage in ongoing budgeting, not just 1 year at a time, 2 years at a time, but multiple years at a time, so that we're constantly forecasting and seeing which direction we're headed and establishing a plan to get there. The second area is that we have to focus on our core mission. It was said here multiple times that we need to get back to basics and decide what it is that we are as a city and really focus on delivering those services well. That means eliminating some functions that are things that we support but not critical to our day-to-day operations. We must consolidate departments, and we must identify ways to streamline our current operations so that we're as efficient and effective in engaging in what our core mission is. The third area is to work on modernizing and strengthening our workforce. One of the things that has been raised multiple times, and something that I recommended early this calendar year, is pension reform. The biggest driver in our deficit is our pension system. It's simply not sustainable. Our pension system is a vested right to our employees. It's part of, it has been demonstrated that we don't have the authority to change the pension system for those people who are participating in it now. And even if we were to negotiate a higher contribution, we have to replace that higher contribution with a like benefit to that employee. So at the end of the day, any changes to our pension system for our current employees don't necessarily result in any real savings. However, that is not the case for future employees. And while we certainly shouldn't be hiring aggressively now, and we will be hiring at some point, and it is entirely fair to establish a new set of rules, a new kind of pension system for those employees who could not work here. Certainly, if there had been the leadership 10, 15 years ago to do a change, make a change in our pension system, we would be in a much different place today. The other area is we must engage in civil service reform to provide us greater flexibility and ensure greater accountability of our workforce. The final area in which we need to focus on is in identifying those areas that the private sector does better than we can. We've talked about the convention center. Why is that something that the city has to do exclusively? Why couldn't it be done through a different kind of situation? The zoo is another example of that. But essentially what we should do is go through every city function and ask ourselves, can it be done cheaper, more effectively in the private sector for those areas that are not part of our core responsibility, or those things that the city has to do or can only do. And for the next 3 years, we're proposing a plan to privatize many of the services that we currently do, with the assumption that doing so would be cheaper, mainly because the pension and healthcare costs that are associated with city employees doing them will not be part of the overall cost. Engaging in this plan, this multi-year plan, which has been directed by the leadership of the city and will be proposed as part of our financial status report on Friday, is going to be a very difficult thing to achieve. It's easy to put a plan together. It's much harder to actually implement it. And what everyone will be watching is our ability to actually implement these various ideas and engage in a committed process to systematically adopt these various initiatives one by one. The hardest ones are in front of us, and certainly as in an economy with an unemployment rate quickly reaching 15% in the city of Los Angeles, and with many of us knowing personally folks who have been impacted by this recession, the last thing we want to do is to add to that unemployment rolls and see more people out in the street, people in our own city family. But the reality is that we have no other choice. We're in a situation where we have to downsize our workforce. It is simply not sustainable. And the kind of revenue that we're hoping to see generated in the future won't really mitigate the problems that we are facing today, tomorrow, and in the next year. The last time the city encountered a major recession, which was in the early 1990s as a result of the dot-com bust, the result of the closing of bases, the end of the Cold War, and a number of other factors that specifically impacted Southern California, it took the city almost 10 years to make up for the revenue that it lost. Clearly, the recession we're facing today is much harder than that of the early 90s. And so, as it was stated earlier, revenue alone won't fix our problem. And if we were to pursue any new revenue, it is my belief that we first need to demonstrate to the taxpayers of the city that we've done everything we can to restructure ourselves, to strengthen our own capacity, and to eliminate waste and inefficiency before we ask the taxpayers to contribute more. At this point in time, in terms of the process, as I mentioned, our financial status report will be presented to the public and to the council on Friday. It will be before this committee on Monday, and we hope to put it before the council for adoption on Wednesday. This is certainly a fast track given the major decisions that need to be made. But as it was stated as part of the public comment, the more we wait, the bigger the cuts, the more people we have to lay off, the more programs we have to eliminate. We simply cannot wait much longer before we take very decisive action. I'll be happy to respond to any questions that you may have at this time.
Again, let me just ask for clarity. When you said the report will be presented on Friday, it becomes a public document, but would the public have access through it, council file?
Yes, it will be on council file. It'll also be on our website.
Okay. So the public will be able to get the FSR before we hear it on February 1st?
That is correct.
Okay. And then could you give the public just a brief sense of, when we talk about revenues down, where have we suffered the greatest loss in revenue and those that may continue to be declining?
Compared to other major cities throughout the country, this city actually enjoys a very diverse revenue stream. We're not like New York that has an income tax, for example, which is dramatically impacted by the economy. And under normal circumstances or less dramatic circumstances as the one we're facing today, that mix of revenue sort of balances out at the end of the day. What we're seeing is something that we haven't seen in a very, very long time, which is that virtually every category of revenue is seeing a decline. We anticipated somewhere between 9 and 10% decline in revenue. Now it's much larger than that, even that from what we anticipated under the most pessimistic circumstances. The most dramatic has been in sales tax, and sales tax obviously is impacted by unemployment. We could see it in the shopping malls and the stores. People are simply not buying in the same way that they bought in the past. We're seeing in the way we engage in reimbursements from the proprietaries. When the airport and the harbor are seeing declines in their own revenues as a result of the unprecedented drop in cargo coming in through the harbor and the unprecedented drop of flights into LAX, that impacts the rest of the city. The efficiencies through the less usage of water and power have resulted in a smaller transfer from the DWP. We're seeing it in the areas of documentary fees, which is part of the housing crisis that we have surfaced. We're seeing it in the area of our gas and utility tax. With the drop in natural gas, there's been a counterpart drop in our taxes related to natural gas. We've seen a drop in the use of telephones. People are canceling their landlines and only having a cell phone, or they're not buying cell phones for their kids in the way they could have in the past as a result of the recession. So virtually every single category of revenue is dramatically dropping. The only area that we've seen a slight increase has been in the area of property tax, a modest increase of about $10 million. And that's because, obviously, as housing prices go down, we're actually seeing an increase in people purchasing homes. We're hoping that we've bottomed out, that this is the worst it's going to get. Unfortunately, we say that every quarter. There's certainly been talk at the national level that we've turned the corner on the recession. But one thing we know about the way the economy impacts local government is always the last to experience a decline, and it's always the last to experience an increase. So even if the economy were to improve in a very short period of time, we're going to be the last ones to actually see that improvement within our revenue. It is fair to assume that this is not a temporary situation, at least for the next 2 or 3 years. It's very likely that our revenue will continue to hover in the range that we currently are in, and so that is why we're recommending permanent reductions to our city expenditures, so that we're not confronted with one-time problems, with ongoing problems, and deal with it with one-time solutions.
The other issue is, just to make sure people are aware of the significance, I think you mentioned that we started the budget year by projecting 10% less revenue compared to the previous year, and then we've had subsequent drops close to $180 million at this time. Could you kind of go over that just so people understand the depth of some of those losses?
Again, what is generating the deficit that we're currently facing is that when we adopted the budget, we knew we were in the middle of a recession. We anticipated that our revenue would continue beyond the decline because we had already seen that decline the previous year, and we estimated that decline would be about 10% from what it was at that time. That was based on a review of other major recessions, in hearing what forecasters have been saying in academic institutions about how powerful this recession would be. Unfortunately, our estimates were not as pessimistic as they should have been, because we're seeing a decline that's larger than that, in some cases twice as much, depending on what the revenue stream we're talking about. And so that's really been the principal driver behind our current deficit. On the expenditure side, as I indicated, we've been very forceful and aggressive in reducing our expenditures, and have successfully mitigated the deficit that we were presented at the time that the budget was adopted.
Okay. In years past, as we talked about some of our financial shortfalls, there's always been a dispute amongst labor unions and our community as to whether this deficit is for real. Have we turned the corner to where generally there's a consensus that the short revenue issues are real? Have we pretty well resolved in both the community meetings and also with the unions that these are real deficits, that they're not just put up for a show or for discussion?
Well, we're certainly doing everything we can to make that point. We had the opportunity to meet with all of our bargaining units on Friday. We basically engaged in an open book discussion. We walked through every single revenue source, every single decline. We stayed as long as we needed to stay to answer any questions that they may have. I can't speak for the bargaining units, but I could say that there was a sense of acknowledgement that this problem is real. It certainly is consistent with what you see in your own neighborhoods, in your own households, and in the state and nationally. We're not alone in this situation. I recently spoke to the former CEO, Bill Fujioka, who's now at the County of Los Angeles. The county is experiencing a $320 million drop in their revenue compared to what was adopted in their budget. And again, they share a lot of the same revenue sources as we do. We all see what's happening in Sacramento, but virtually every city throughout the nation is encountering the same difficulties. We've been speaking to our colleagues in all the major cities, and they all share the same frustration about this dramatic drop in revenue that's all related to the state of the economy. In our case, we had both an expenditure, we started off the year with an expenditure problem and a revenue problem, and we've mitigated the expenditure problem, but it's hard to control. We have little control over how the revenue is generated, and it's particularly in those areas that are sensitive to the economy.
And then also it's been pretty well chronicled that what impact the state has had on some of our revenues, whether it's CRA funds, property tax, gas tax. What is your sense for the 10-11 fiscal year as relates to dealing with the state addressing our financial concerns?
Well, they pretty much have taken everything they could take from us. There's still some dispute whether they're going to touch our transportation dollars, and we have to watch that carefully. They took our property tax. There's really little for them to actually take from local government, but I'm sure there's somebody assigned in Sacramento to try to find a way to do that.
No, not one person, many.
The whole team.
Just something I wanted to discuss. Need pension reform drastically. Some speakers talked about that. They're absolutely right. We need to look at defined contributions. We need to look at what the employees are contributing to the system. All that needs to be discussed. And with the exception of police and fire, which are by charter, if the vote of the people have to change it, the city council can go through a process of making those changes. So does that summarize our pension system problem?
Yeah, that's a good job summarizing it.
Yeah. And I just want to get that out there because I think people need to understand how desperate that situation is, and we need major reform there. We will do a lot of things this year with laying off people, consolidating departments. All that stuff is important, but the biggest gorilla in the room is still that pension cost factor that's out there.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Lynn, could you give an overview from the CLA's office and also just make some comments of what distinguishes your office from the CAO's office so people are aware?
I'm Lynn Ozawa from the Chief Legislative Analyst's Office. First of all, by charter, the council does not get involved with deliberating over the proposed budget until the mayor releases his proposed budget on April 20th. That's by charter. It is the mayor's prerogative, however, if he chooses to include the council in the development of his proposed budget, which the mayor has indicated a willingness to do for 2010-11, which is a departure from prior years. The CLA has been participating in the numerous meetings that have been held and chaired by Miguel and his staff. We're looking at many different proposals, looking at how we can provide more efficient services, what our core mission is, how we can reduce costs, what steps need to be taken, either through labor negotiation or other charter amendments or ballot measures that need to be adopted. So those discussions have been taking place and for quite some time now. I do want to add, though, I'm sorry, I'll continue with the CLA's involvement and how we're different from the CAO. The CLA, our primary distinction from the CAO is that the CLA works only for the council. We do not work for anybody else. We do not work for the mayor. The council, the 15 members, are our bosses. And the CAO, by contrast, in the development of the proposed budget, will work with the mayor exclusively until the mayor releases his budget on April 20th. From April 20th forward, the CAO will work with the council as well during their budget deliberations in order to get them whatever information and analysis that's necessary. And they work hand in hand with the CLA's office in order to get the council the best information available so that they can make the best decisions possible.
And one of the things in years past, there was a distinction, like you said, in April, that the CAO and the mayor's office worked on the budget, and then in turning it over to the CLA and the council, what's the timeline difference that the CLA and the council worked on that budget compared to the preparation of the budget?
In accordance with the charter, the mayor does not have to release his budget until April 20th. He must release the proposed budget to the council by that date. And the council has until June the 1st to adopt a resolution outlining any changes to the proposed budget that they desired at that time. So the council has about 6 weeks in order to do their work on the budget. By contrast, the proposed budgets from departments are due to the mayor. The mayor can pick the date, but generally it's mid-November to mid-December. And then he has until April 20th to work with the CAO to present the proposed budget to the council.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the information. I'd just like to advise the public that's watching on Channel 35, the next budget, or we call budget on the meetings on the road, February 22nd will be in the west side of the city and Hamilton High School on South Robertson. And all these meetings start at 6 p.m. On March the 8th, we'll be on the east side of the city at El Sereno Recreation Center. And then on March 22nd, we'll be at Council District 9's City Hall office on 4301 Central Avenue. So we'd invite the public to those next 3 meetings that are coming up, and we'll continue the process. And then somewhere around April, we'll start having our formal budget hearings regarding the mayor's budget. And we'd also invite anyone that's interested. Generally, on every Monday at 1 o'clock, we have a budget hearing, budget meeting at City Hall in room 10. 10 what? 1010. Room 1010, every Monday at 1 o'clock. All of this can be identified on the city's website for those that are interested. This concludes our public agenda, and so we'd ask the Sergeant Arm to clear the room for our closed session agenda.
That's a second.